Welcome to Out of the Fold. This episode is about Jennifer, the child abuse scandals associated with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and how close her family member got to becoming another victim, were the catalysts that led to her leaving the organization and questioning her faith in the first place. Jennifer is active in the ex-religious community online, and she hosts a podcast called Not the Weaker Vessel, which focuses on how different it is for women to leave faith communities than it is for men. The link to her show is in the description. No religious organizations, companies, or individuals were contacted for comment about any of the content of this episode. The views expressed are strictly those of the ones expressing them. Our conversation began on a Wednesday evening.
The last religion that I got out of was the Jehovah's Witnesses. And just a little history on that. I guess I should backtrack. The reason I became a Jehovah's Witness was largely because I was indoctrinated by evangelicals. Growing up, I went to an evangelical school in middle school. So I was indoctrinated with hellfire and rapture and all those scary things that religion does to kids.
It's wonderful.
It was terrifying. I remember having like videos of hellfire versus heaven. And then it was like in a youth group type setting. And then they would say, if you die tonight, where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's terrifying. So of course I got baptized really young in the evangelical church because of the fear. But it was pre-adolescence, so you have no idea what's coming for you. All the teen years and that. And so when I was a teen is when I started really questioning how I was being brought up and hellfire. And I believed still that there was a God that would do that. But I started feeling like if that's the case, I can't serve a God like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my teen years, I just, I guess I was agnostic in a way, although that fear was always nagging that maybe the God of the Bible is, real, and maybe those things are going to happen. Maybe my whole family will be raptured and I'll be destined to hell. Those things still played in the back of my mind, but I think as a teen, in general, you kind of don't have the same fears. Like, that's why you do reckless things in general when you're a teen. So I think that was playing, like both sides were playing. But I guess my quote unquote bad association got the best of me, and I kind of just did whatever. In my mind, I remember processing it like, well, if I'm going to go to hell for like minor infractions in my mind, like listening to the wrong music or having a boyfriend, then I'm going to do it up. I'm going to have fun. And that's what I did. So as a teen, I kind of just went off the rails and crazy. And I ended up getting pregnant on graduation night. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that's when it happened.
Oh, wow.
So I got pregnant when I was 18. And again, still the nagging thoughts of like, okay, now I'm pregnant and I've really done it. I'm really going to hell if I die. And then that, along with having a life, inside of you and thinking, what am I going to teach this little person that I'm bringing into the world? Like, I was so confused at that juncture. So all that was playing in the background at that juncture. And I should add that um, my family, when I got pregnant, I was 18, and my dad had just gotten a notice that he had to move. We were in California at the time, that he had to move to New York for his job. And I, at that time, just chose not to go. My husband, who's currently my husband, is the father of my child.
Hmm.
He was like really supportive and like, we'll just make it, just stay here in California and we'll figure this out. So that's what I did. My family moved 3,000 miles away while I was pregnant at such a young age. So I
Hmm.
was in an extremely vulnerable situation. And at that time, simultaneously, my boyfriend at the time, his family was um, becoming reinstated in the Jehovah's Witnesses, which means that, well, he was raised a Jehovah's Witness for the most part, but both of his parents kind of fell off, and like Rachel, I think, described like disfellowshipping, or if you just like fade. At the juncture when we moved in with them, his dad was getting reinstated from being disfellowshipped. So he was going back into the religion. And we were in like I said, extremely vulnerable situation. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are very good at love bombing, and they love people in vulnerable situations. Like that's really their sweet spot. That's how they recruit. They
Yeah.
even have like, we had meetings where, they would tell you like, just keep going back to the same doors that have apathy, because, one day they might be going through something terrible, and the message will reach their heart. And so that's basically just saying like, wait until someone's vulnerable.
Yeah. Wait until you have the opportunity to take advantage of somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's the position I was in his dad's home. He was going back, and they have all these rules about premarital sex as well as any other fundamentalist religion. So that was becoming a problem, that we were just kind of living there, quote unquote, in sin. Um, and then my husband's sister at the time was also being love bombed and being talked to by my father-in-law about going back into the Jehovah's Witnesses. We were really close, and so she started talking to me about the religion. And I remember pushing back, and even though I didn't have like my own personal beliefs at that time, I still like was defending like the evangelical way of looking at things, because that's all I had. I would just talk about, well, you don't celebrate birthdays, and you don't do this, and you don't do that. So one day she told me, well, why don't you sit in on my study, and she can answer all your questions, because she was telling me, I'm just barely studying myself. I don't have all the answers.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. Um, and I remember I had told them like, I can't use your Bible because you've changed the Bible, so I'll use my Bible. And then I realized, well, I don't have a Bible. So the the person brought me a Bible that I said I wanted to use, and everything that I questioned, like they have an answer to.
Mm.
And especially hellfire, like that's one of the big things. So like, they love evangelicals that are leaving their religion, because you know one of the big things about not being able to reconcile your beliefs is the contradiction of God is love, but if you don't do exactly what he wants you to do, you may burn forever.
Yeah.
So I feel like evangelicals are very susceptible to a cult like Jehovah's Witnesses, because of that. Also, the love bombing when you're vulnerable. And then Jehovah's Witnesses like have a lot of fun. As evangelicals, you don't drink, you don't dance. And Jehovah's Witnesses do all of that. So
Hmm.
all of that was very appealing to me as a, I was still like 19, early 20s. And I thought, well, they're very balanced. Like, look at, they're like, you know, dancing and having parties and drinking. And yeah, so I was just very vulnerable. That's how I came into the Jehovah's Witnesses. And my husband and I, well, we got married and then we got baptized together
Mm-hmm.
in our early 20s.
Hmm.
So we spent, 24 years in and just kind of going through the motions. You're kind of on a rabbit hole. Jehovah's Witnesses keep you extremely busy, so you kind of don't think about the little things that happen that, tweak your cognitive dissonance. You're so busy that um, it's hard to like sit down with yourself and like have the silence to work it all out. So we were just on a hamster wheel for all those years.
What kind of things did they have you doing? You said that they kept you really busy. So what did that entail?
In the beginning, it was 3 meetings a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's like 2 days during the week after work, you're going to a meeting. And then on Sunday, you're going for 2 hours. They did do away with the third meeting, but they wanted you to replace it with family study.
Hmm.
So you still basically have to set time aside, especially as, the quote unquote head of the household. You'd have to plan, like, what are we going to study? All that takes time when you have a full-time job. And then you have to go out and service. The minimum is 10 hours or you're on the radar, like you're not doing very good.
Hmm.
Um, 10 hours a month, I'm sorry. That's a minimum that you should be doing. And so there's always that pressure of, you have to go out basically 2 to 3 weekends for several hours in order to meet that requirement. And then you have Sunday where you're waking up for meetings. So it's 7 days a week. There's something going on that you have to fill your time with. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that is busy. That's just like you really do never get a chance to just be away from it for even, 24 hours. It's just nonstop.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a few experiences that caused extreme cognitive dissonance, and we knew something was wrong. We had an instance where an older man was grooming my daughter. He was married. He had reached out to her for babysitting when she was 15, which we didn't think anything of. Like we had known him for years and, been friends with his friends. We were all always around each other. So we never had our guard too far up. So when, he reached out for her to babysit, we didn't really think anything of it. But then he started texting her about her photography. She was into photography, so he would like send her certain things like, oh, what camera do you use? And just, the whole grooming process, just like talking to her, making sure she's comfortable, communicating with him. And then it started escalating. And when it started escalating, she got scared and gave me her phone. And I took her phone to work, and it had escalated to the point where I had proof that he was trying to come over when we weren't home. He was saying inappropriate things. So I took it to the elders, and they didn't do anything to him. And they basically questioned her as like, though, like, why did you text him, and why did you do this, and why
Oh my
did you
God.
do that? And it's like, we had it in writing, and
Yeah.
I'm just looking at my husband like, what is happening here? And he has a wife, and his wife has a daughter from a previous marriage. And so that's always nagged at me. Like, we know that he has a problem. Um,
Yeah.
and the elders didn't do anything. So we kind of filed that away. What Jehovah's Witnesses will do when it comes to abuse, even if something has gotten to the point of you've been abused, actually physically been abused, they have this two witness rule. And like I said, we didn't really fall under that because I had everything in writing. But when they mishandle something and like it's being mishandled, they will just tell you, well, this is that it wasn't handled right and the elders didn't do the right thing, but Jehovah will take care of it. You just leave it in Jehovah's hands and eventually he'll take care of this issue in this congregation. And it's really crazy to think back of like my mindset at the time, thinking like that's an okay response. But it happens over and over, like all these abuse cases that you read about now. Like the stories are so similar that that you're told the same thing. Just leave it; it'll be taken care of. And because you think this is a higher power that you're dealing with. You when you're indoctrinated, you don't think like this. These are just men telling me this.
Yeah.
You're thinking like you do defer it to Jehovah and hope that everything goes okay. Um,
You
so
do
that
you
had happened to us. Yeah.
you do know now that that wasn't like, your fault, right? That like you didn't know that there was something wrong with that. That like you could just put it in Jehovah's hands and like that it was going to be okay. Like I hope, and I hope I'm not speaking out of line by saying that, but like I do hope that that like now looking back that like you weren't like you weren't like evil for having believed that at the time. Like that wasn't your fault. Like you referred to them as a cult, so I mean that was brainwashing that let you feel like that was okay. Like that wasn't you.
Yeah, I definitely do now. I have my moments.
Sure.
I have my moments where I'm like, how how did I let that go so far? And subsequently we had other issues, as she became a teenager. And we just let the elders cross so many boundaries with our family
Hmm.
that like I go back and forth. Honestly, some days I realize like what you just said, and some days it's just hard to eat. It's just hard to even think that that was my mentality at any point,
Yeah.
because we have grown so much, in the last 2 years. That it's like, was that even me? It seems like another like person.
Yeah. And I understand. I mean, there are things that there are things that I've done in my life that like I'm not proud of, but like I don't really know who I was at the time that I did them, and it's I get it. I get it. How old was your daughter at the time with the guy that she was texting with? You might have mentioned it, but I'm sorry I missed that.
She was 15.
She was 15, and how old was the
Yeah.
guy? You said that he was married and everything.
He
So I
was
mean,
married. Yeah, I'm not sure. He's early 30s, I think. Yeah.
and the elders blamed her.
Yeah, I mean, some of the questioning was very much slanted towards trying to get her to say something. And, she ended up, we had to put her in therapy because it messed us all up, this whole
Understandably.
experience. I remember her saying, like, um, they're painting me like, I did this and that. He had told them, she's not even a virgin and things like that. And they questioned her on that. And I remember her just like crying, saying, take me to the doctor. Like, and that was my line. I was like, I believe you. And, you know, there's no way I'm going to take you to the doctor and like question you in that regard. But I did let the elders do that to her. You know,
Mm.
when we were all in a room, you know, yeah. So it's just the control that you let these men have at a certain point in your you know, you just
Well, I mean, they know what they're doing. They have to know what they're doing, right? I mean, it's not happening by accident. It's not like there's just, and I don't know how much. I'm learning myself. Like when I'm when I'm saying this right now, I'm speaking hypothetically. Like there's no way that like that they just sort of happened upon something that just happened to be brainwashy, right? Like this is something
yeah,
this is something planned that like that they know is going to have the effect that it's having, right?
exactly. I believe that. Yeah. Um, I I mean, at the same time, I believe that the elders themselves are brainwashed.
That's a fair
Um,
point. Yeah.
and I believe what you said is more from the top down.
Yeah.
Like, you know, L. Ron Hubbard and the people who start these things know what they're doing. They know the
Right.
they know the formula,
Right.
right? And like it's copied. It's pretty close to like, okay, how do we get people to do what we want, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and how much fear, how much control, and so on the local levels, definitely the elders are just as brainwashed as we are in most cases. I do believe that there are some people in the organization that understand it's a cult and they just like the fake power that they get
Mm-hmm.
by staying in. I do believe there's both type of people. And pedophiles are attracted to this kind of organization because they know they're going to be protected. So there's the brainwash, and then there's the people that are in there to manipulate. I do believe that, looking back.
Yeah. Yeah. And the elders themselves. So I can't believe I haven't asked this of anybody yet. The elders are basically like they're it doesn't sound like they're the equivalent to like a priest in you know other forms of Christianity. Are they like how would you describe them? Are they kind of like just you know you have the congregation, you have the people that generally go there, and then these people are just sort of like the next rank up that people can go to for advice and these kinds of things. Like what's sort of the political system of this, and where do the elders fit into that?
Well, first, so it's only males. And
Okay.
first, they will appoint males as ministerial servants, which
Mm-hmm.
are basically, they do the work, the busy work that the elders don't have time to do or probably don't want to do. Because there's a lot of busy work in a cult. I mean, you have to keep track of everyone's hours, and you know, like we have so many meetings. There's all these talks to, you know, organize, and people, you know, come in and out from different areas to give talks. So there's a lot of coordination involved, which is why they will appoint younger men to be ministerial servants, and then while they're ministerial servants is when you're getting groomed as a male to be an
Okay.
elder. And I think, you know, looking back, the grooming process is how much do you follow the direction? How much do you fall in line? You know, like how malleable are you? Like you basically they're training company men. And so if you get to the point where you've proved to be a good old company man, that's when they'll appoint you as an elder. Um, and then they have, you know, they'll have like a body of elders in each congregation, and they work as a group for judicial situations, which like judicial situations would be like if you sinned, basically they call it a gross sin, like fornication, drugs, you know, anything that would be, it basically comes down to anything that would give a bad name to the congregation or organization,
Yeah.
you would go to a judicial committee, and then there's three elders that preside over that. And basically, they have everyone's fate in their hands. They have everyone's families in their hands, because if they deem you as guilty or like not repentant enough, you lose your family.
Oof.
And then, that's a way to control you to come back.
Yeah. That's exactly what that is. So
Yes.
at what point do you think it becomes that, like, you know, if we're saying that, like, this is brainwashing, then, like, at what point is it that it's is it like the next step above the elders, that, like, are they still brainwashed? Like, is it the Illuminati, and there's one guy at the top who's doing all the brainwashing, and then everybody else below that one guy is just like they're all the pawns? Or is it that, like, at some point you kind of get to, like, a council that knows what they're doing, and, like, they are, just like a couple of steps above the elders? Like, do you I don't know if you know, but do you
Yeah,
know
I
if that's
don't
how it
know.
works?
I would actually love to know, because okay, so above the elders, there's circuit overseers, which kind of, they visit a bunch of congregations in a certain area
Okay.
over the year. And so they're above the elders. And then there's district overseer. I mean, there's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
And each layer you have to prove what a company man you are.
Yeah.
And who knows where it stops? I mean, a lot of XJWs will say that they believe even the top, the governing body, the 8 men, are brainwashed too.
Hmm.
And I'm not 100% sold on that. I kind of, I could be convinced either way. I think there's good arguments for both sides.
I guess it kind of makes sense if, like, if there was, like, a group of people that were brainwashed, and then, like, let's say they were, like, they were the first group to be brainwashed, and then there was, like, one group above them that brainwashed them, and they knew what they were doing, and then that group at
Mm,
the top died or resigned. Then the people that would be leading it would be the brainwashed leading the brainwashed. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and then that would
And
just
I think
keep
that's what
going from
most
there on
most
out.
XJWs would tell you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard for me to reconcile that at this juncture with the amount of child abuse cases that have come out. Because if you're truly leading this and you're truly brainwashed, you would make some decent changes in the policy.
Fair
Like,
enough.
it just doesn't make sense to me that they're buckling down, even after going through the Australian Royal Commission. They're standing before a government saying, we're just not going to change.
Hmm.
To me, that's a little suspect to say they're just poor little brainwashed men that, like, uh, it's
Yeah.
hard for me to reconcile.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you do have to say that you're responsible. Like, you do have to say that
Exactly.
it doesn't matter, that you're not in control. Like, you have to regain control. Like, we have to hold this thing against you.
Yes.
Is that what happened with you eventually? Like, did you reach a point of such cognitive dissonance that you couldn't stay with it?
Yeah. So, what happened was I was driving home from work, and my son was in the car, and we turned on NPR, and it was a news piece about the Jehovah's Witnesses covering of child abuse. And I remember my son was like, "Oh, turn it off. It's just going to make you angry." But I didn't. I listened to the whole thing,
Hmm.
and I was spinning. I mean, my world was literally spinning, thinking like, "Wait a minute." I remember them telling us, "Oh, you're just in a bad congregation." I mean, we even moved congregations. And now I realize, based on this news report, there's something systemic about this problem. I mean, it's coming, that NPR laid it out, uh, that they're hiding a database of predators, the two witness rule, was in the piece. Like there was a lot of things that I never would know about. But when I went home and started Googling, every article and everything I read about the problem aligned with, what we had been through, even though it didn't get, like I said, we had intercepted it, but the way they dealt with us subsequently aligned with what the victims were saying. So I knew that at that point something was really wrong. Um, and then that just led me to keep researching. I think for 2 months I was up all night, literally up all night.
Yeah.
And I found, XJWs, we have JW Facts, which debunks every piece of the doctrine that you
Mm-hmm.
could possibly imagine. So I was on those sites and just, it went from the child abuse program to deprogramming myself and finding XJW Reddit. And I kept it to myself for a little while. And then it did get to a point where I just couldn't hold it in anymore. And I brought it to my husband. And because I had done so much research before I said anything, I know looking back, I was overwhelming him. Like it was overwhelming everything I was trying to say. Because every time he would try to intercept like one of my points, I was basically already back to agnostic and debunking even the Bible. So it was so much for him to take on, like, wait a minute. Okay, so there's a problem in the organization, but wait, you don't even believe that there's, the God of the Bible. You don't even believe this. You don't even believe that. And so it was, it was a crisis for both of us because I didn't know even how to hold back after reading everything I read and realizing that, oh, not only is it the organization, but now I'm questioning the Bible because the organization has based all their policies on the Bible. It
Right.
automatically leads you there. It's like if you're open to it, it quickly goes there. And especially having an evangelical background, it's like, well, there's no way I'm going to go, I already had debunked that. Like, there can't be a hell and there can't be, that doesn't make sense. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're deprogramming from a religion that, like, the one reason that kind of got you in it was debunking hell, well, there's nowhere else to go. Like, and that's a funny quote because Jehovah's Witnesses, when you start talking apostate or whatever, they will say, well, where else would you go? Because we have, the true religion. And my friends started asking me that, like, as I started opening up to other people, they're like, well, okay, there's this problem, but where else would you go?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, nowhere. Like, I don't have to go anywhere. Like,
Right.
a lot of people do go from Jehovah's Witnesses to Christian. I think it goes both ways, like I was saying in the beginning. I think evangelicals are susceptible to the Jehovah's Witness doctrine, but it also goes the other way too. I feel like if you're born in as a Jehovah's Witness, letting go of a future promise of everlasting life is something that it takes a little bit to be able to let that go. And some people can't. And they do end up going to like mainstream Christianity.
I'm picturing you like presenting all this information to him, and you have 60 days of no sleep as well.
Yeah.
Like I can only imagine that it's a lot for him to take in from somebody who was, who's I mean, no offense, but like who's been obsessed over that for 60
Yes.
days. I mean, that's a lot. How did he end up taking it? Like when you finally got it all out, and I mean, how did that affect your relationship, your family? How did it react? How did he, see you after all that?
So we went through, so in the very beginning, my plan was to, I had presented to him like, this is going to be okay. I don't believe any of this anymore, but yet I'm fine if you do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I even said in the beginning, I will even go with you to meetings so that, you'll feel supported. But then I went to one meeting awake and I had a panic attack because once you're awake, when to sit through that, to sit through all the things that you can hear the brainwashing, you can hear the crazy things that they're saying. It was overwhelming to
Mm.
me, and I had a panic attack, and I realized what I just promised him is not sustainable.
Right.
And then so we went kind of through another iteration of like, okay, now what? So now we're on the same page now. He's awake too, and we're both out of the organization. But and so he's told me since then. At the time when I was doing this, he thought it was like, is this like a gateway? Are you just trying to say you want a divorce? Because the D word came up a lot because we were like, how do we make this work?
Right.
Um, our kids were grown at the time, so you know I was going through a midlife crisis anyway.
Sure.
I was going through like, oh, I'm empty nesting pretty soon, and I had left a job that I had been at for 18 years. Like I was already in a midlife crisis when this happened to me. So in his mind, he's like, "Are you just trying to like dissolve this marriage in a weird way?" Like, and I kept saying like, "No, that's not what this is about." And so we kept getting off track because, his fears like, what does this mean? It's one thing if you come across it yourself and you have your own, like I was saying, I was doing my own thing for a couple months. It's another thing to drag someone along that thought process with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it was really overwhelming and taxing. I mentioned that my daughter was waking up simultaneously, but she was in New York and I was in California. And she was waking up because there was some talks about, like homosexuality in a very, the way she puts it is like, it was just hateful. And that's not how we viewed it. That's not how, like, you know, it's a weird thing because when you're indoctrinated, you say, like, yes, it's against the Bible. But we kind of always skirted around it, like, but we still love them, this whole like trying to cover over how bad it is that you're anti-gay, But she heard a talk and she said it was so hateful and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of clicked something in her mind. And then she started talking to coworkers. And one day they showed her a chart and they were like, your religion sounds a lot like Scientology. And they showed her a chart of like all the similar practices. And it just clicked, like everything she had already been feeling about like how hateful the organization is, and then just seeing that in black and white. She was waking up, and then she was supposed to be moving back to California at the time that I was waking up. And I had gone to that meeting where I had a panic attack, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to fake it with her.
Mm-hmm.
We're really close. We've always been really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was also scared that she would shun me because I had indoctrinated her and she had gotten baptized. And, you know, I had told her, like, that's an okay thing to do, it's a loving thing to do because we're looking out for the person's everlasting life, not just the temporary. That's how Jehovah's Witnesses reconcile such a harmful practice, is like, well, this life is temporary. What's more important?
Mm-hmm.
The everlasting life. So I indoctrinated her. I knew I was guilty of that. And I thought, what if she shuns me? Like, I can't bear that. But when I had realized it wasn't sustainable for me to fake it or become physically in, mentally out. They call it PMO. um, I just came clean to her and told her like everything I found. And she was like, I can't believe you're saying this. Like, I don't believe any of it either. So I got lucky in that way that like I didn't have to worry about my relationship with my kids.
Nice.
So she moved back, and her husband is into. Um, so circling back to like the beginning, where we just felt like we honestly sat down one day and said, looked at each other and like, we are Eve. They view us like we are trying to destroy our respective families.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Eve, Eve gets this,
Yep.
temptation, and then she draws Adam into the ultimate sin. Like, that's what we felt like. They never obviously articulated that, but that's what it felt like to be presenting, debunking everything that they've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. Like, I know men who wake up first have a hard time dealing with, their wives and the whole situation, but it's just another level, especially with such a misogynistic religion as Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, it's really up there when it comes to misogyny and like your head and your place. We have to wear head coverings when we, um, this is crazy. So if there's a baptized boy that's 12 in the congregation and like there's a meeting for field service, if you as a woman do the prayer, you have to put something on your head because there's a 12-year-old boy that is like not your head per se, but like it has rank over you just because they're baptized. It's
Oh.
crazy. Yeah, that's how far like the misogyny goes and how they make you feel like you're definitely the weaker vessel.
Wow. It sounds like you and your daughter are on the same wavelength, by the way. So I think that's kind of cool that happened at the same time.
It was literally my saving grace having
Yeah.
her like be on the same wavelength at the same time.
Yeah. No, and that's crazy. So you guys didn't talk about that at all until the time that you did talk about it, and then it was like, holy shit, like we're both doing this at the exact same time.
Yes, exactly.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. That's awesome.
It was really cool.
So you kind of like you both sort of realized that you were coming across like Eve to your respective husbands. Is that what you were trying to say with that basically?
Yes,
That like
exactly. That's what it felt like. It felt like they felt like we were trying to destroy, the fabric of everything that
hmm
they had built, which it was. I mean, it is what it is. I realized I was in a cult and like I gotta leave,
Yeah.
So that is destroying everything you've built and everything believed. But in their minds, it's also destroying everlasting life. Like it was big. It was huge.
So at what point did they realize that, you weren't trying to feed them sinful fruit and that you were actually trying to show them something that you found to be true, and that your truth was not like, that being that was not something that would like send them to hell. Like at what did it take for them to realize that you weren't just trying to tempt them away from something?
So with my husband, I was appealing to the child abuse problem because like I said, we came pretty close,
Uh-huh.
and the situations, the way they were handled, really do align with how they mishandle. So I tried to really focus on that, and there was a convention coming up, and he told me like, I understand what you're saying and I understand that there's a problem, but they will fix it. It will get fixed. If it's this big, if it's as big as you're saying and as big as these news reports, worldwide, it's getting exposed, they're going to address it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already been reading, quote unquote, apostate material, and I had the outline for that convention, and I knew they were not going to address it. So I said, okay, let's go. I will go with you to this because I want you to hear what does or doesn't happen. And so we went, and it was a lot of victim blaming and no acknowledgement of the problems from the top. And so he was very angry that, he was so assured that they would definitely address it.
Yeah.
And that started him actually reading and watching things that I asked him to watch, because prior to that, Jehovah's Witness, they use the BITE model: behavior control, information control, thought control, emotional control. So information control is big.
Yeah.
They drill down, not even news reports. Like everything that I initially had started reading, I wasn't even supposed to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, initially he wasn't doing that either. I would say, please just, this is like NPR. This is the Washington Post, and no, things can be skewed. They even use fake news. They literally say that. They use the Donald Trump, like, it could be fake news. So they're very trained not to even look. So when they didn't address it, that's when he started finally at least just reading. And then as he started reading, what happened was he had told the elders, because he was scared, like Jen's having all these doubts, like she says she doesn't even believe in God. Like he basically turned me in
Yeah.
to the elders, which, at that time, that's like something you just do. Like even my friends were saying, you need help, you need to go to the elders. And I knew, like, if I tell the elders what I'm thinking, it's an automatic disfellowshipping. Like they're not here to help me. They're here to get me out. And he didn't understand that. He's never been an elder. He's never been in the boys club. So that's part of why it was so hard for him to wrap his mind around a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he had already told the elders, like, that I need, quote unquote, help. So as he was starting to wake up, they started coming around to talk to me because he had already alerted them. But that was really, like, the best thing that could have happened, because they came and I sat down, and my husband had to sit there and, like, just listen and not interrupt, because a lot of times we would start to talk about something, it would end up in being a fight, because there's all these emotions and stuff. But when the elders were there and I was just talking one-on-one to the elders, he just sat and listened. Mm-hmm. And he absorbed a lot more in that meeting than he ever did in any of the times that we talked. I was telling the elders, like, I basically told them everything from, like, child abuse to shunning, how, like, shunning isn't even biblical. And, like, I asked them, like, why would you even align with Scientology and disconnection? Like, if you are the true religion, it doesn't make sense to use cult tactics. And I mean, there was a lot of things that, I got, like, dead silence on some of the questions, including my husband. was
Good questions,
like,
though. Those are good.
And so that meeting really helped push things along. I remember he asked them, because he was already reading the news by that point, if there was a predator in our hall, would you tell us? And they said yes. And they left, and he started searching Megan's Law and literally found someone in our hall, and it was like forced rape. It was really extreme. Mm-hmm. And he was like, they literally just told us to our faces that they would tell us if there was someone dangerous in our hall. And here, this guy has been convicted.
Yeah.
Like, how do they not know this? So that kind of sped up his process. he never went back to a meeting. And I formally disassociated at that meeting. And then he wanted to as well. And so we both that's how that all happened. I credit the elders for helping me. And I should say I credit some of my ex-friends for helping me, because as I started coming out to my friends about what I was feeling, they were shunning him. And I had told my friends, it's just me. Like, Richard believes, he 100% believes, and he's like distraught at
Mm-hmm.
like what I'm going through. But they still shunned him. Like, there was no support for him. And so that, combined with going to the convention and having that meeting, that was it for him. It finally, everything that I had been saying to that point finally clicked. So they helped me a lot in a lot of ways, the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
Huh.
Which I would have never dreamed. Like, I was avoiding going to the elders, and I was avoiding telling my friends, but that's really what helped me in the end, get everyone out.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you after you left and like you got out, I mean it sounds like I think you mentioned very briefly that you'd kind of become an agnostic at that point. Is that what you still consider yourself right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any answers. I feel I feel like there's truth in all belief systems. There's some truth,
Mm-hmm.
or else people wouldn't buy into them. Like, there's even like Jesus consciousness, or whatever you would want to call it. Like, there's principles there that are universal. In Buddhism, there's principles that are universal and helpful. Like, I just feel like there's just like not there's no labels to spirituality. And I've just, this time around, coming out of evangelical, but this time around, really undoing everything. It's just being present in the moment that's like spiritual to me. Because when you're in a fundamentalist religion, you're constantly either thinking about the future, like what future rewards are there,
Mm-hmm.
or how am I going to get there, or your past, like, am I good enough? Is this good enough? Uh, so just being in the present is like my spirituality.
Yeah,
Just
and
enjoying the moment the way you couldn't enjoy it before.
yeah. Yeah, and I get what you mean about how there is some element of truth in many aspects of most religions. Like sometimes I hear people talk about the things that Jesus said and I feel something. Sometimes I think about like I read something that the Buddha said the other day and it made me feel something because it was like um it said I'm not who you see in me. You are who you see in me. And I was like, whoa, you just,
Yeah,
you just like, that's moving. You just said something that was powerful. And it's like, so I can't,
exactly.
it's tough for me to say that like, there are these things that, that have no value, like
Exactly.
there's totally value to a lot that's in these, religious books or in sort of like cultures. I don't personally believe any of the superstitious aspect of it, but the morals in a lot of it can be fascinating if not always applicable. In the time that you were doing the research into all of this, and you had your 60 days of insomnia and all that, like you were trying to find how it all kind of pieced together. Did you actually find anything in the Jehovah's Witnesses version of the Bible or in any version of the Bible that did actually justify the things that they were doing, like covering up child abuse?
No, actually, so it was the opposite. So as I was, unraveling all this, I realized the things in the Bible that I can't believe that I just like brushed over before, like Lot sending his daughters for gang rape. I'm like, wait, how how did I read this before? And like
Right.
I one thing that kind of confuses me about myself in that way is like Jehovah's Witnesses really read the Bible. And although I didn't personally do it, like I never personally read through the Bible, we
Mm-hmm.
had meetings where, so in 1 year, basically we would cover the Bible. Like somebody would be just reading the Bible. And I'm like, where was I? Where was my mind? I think I go back to like, well, I worked 50 hours and then I had 2 kids and then I would drag myself to the meeting and I just checked out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure I read that or like read along because I remember that was one of the big things. I'm like, how did I not ever like really read this? Or there's a scripture in Psalms. It's like, dashing God commanded to dash the babies against the rocks. Like, I just don't ever remember that scripture. Like, there's so many of those that as I was like unraveling, I'm like, where was I?
Yeah.
Like I could have debunked this a long time ago if I would have just read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't. I wasn't mentally there.
Yeah.
It was just in a fog, like accepting these things. And of course, in the intensive studies, they never really go into those crazy scriptures that would make you like, But again, we definitely did read over it. And I just don't remember like if I was completely checked out or just too tired to think about it.
Yeah.
But those things do ping me now. Like, wow, where was I? Where was my mind? How did I miss this? Because it's clear it's unethical and unjust and just plain out crazy.
I mean, it sounds like it just became a routine, though. It sounds like it just became what you did every day, or at least multiple, like the majority of the week, every week for a big chunk of your life. I mean, I think there are people that have been where you've been that have unfortunately done terrible things that I can't forgive them for like, or it's not really my place to forgive them, but like I can't say that I look upon them kindly for what they've done. You know what I mean? But like you didn't do anything like that, and like you knew you felt something was wrong and then like you acted on it and all of that. So I mean, like it sounds like you were like you were going through the motions, but the motions felt real, like they felt spiritual when you were doing them.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that like I always thought it was weird because, everyone else seemed to love like going door to door and it would drain me. Like 1 hour of knocking on people's doors would drain me more than a 10-hour day at work. I would literally come home from like a Saturday knocking on doors and sleep all day and think like, why is this so draining to me? Like how come I can't, like everyone else loves this and like I hated it. And I remember one time there was a talk and it was like, a lot of us just do service just enough to hate it. Basically, they were saying if you do it more, you'll love it. And I was just like, I started becoming vocal about it because I felt like that gave me license to admit that I hated it. So I would tell people like, I just really hate this. Like, this is just not me. I just can't handle it. And I'm so drained. And I remember one older sister told me, do you know why you feel so drained? She said, it's because you're doing the most important work in the whole universe. And the demons are, of course they're going to attack us. So I was like, at the time I was like, is that what it is? Like, I'm so drained because the demons are like trying to get me not to go out in service. Crazy. I woke up a little bit after that, but I remember that sure telling me that. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I just thought like I'm not really a people person and I'm not good at it, you know.
Oh man. Combine that with the fact that you're also being told that if you just do 3 more houses, then that's when it'll get easier and you'll love it. So it's your fault that
Yeah, exactly.
you're in the hate period right there.
It's always your fault if
Right.
something is going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could be doing more. You should be, are you praying enough? Are you, you know, studying enough?
Mhm.
Yeah. That's the band-aid for everything that goes wrong, which is why when people do have illnesses that are being, that the religion is contributing to, they just get worse because there's no real help.
Yeah.
What they're trying to tell you that will help actually makes it even worse.
Mhm.
It just drains you even more. Or, you start thinking, well, my prayers aren't working. So what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had mentioned also that you feel like people that come from an evangelical background are kind of susceptible to becoming Jehovah's Witnesses because it's like it is it am I correct by thinking that it's sort of that like there's something about the Jehovah's Witnesses that sort of feels like the next step from like it feels like a logical step to go from being an evangelical to the Jehovah's Witnesses or is there a little bit more to it than that?
Well, I just think that, well, for one, I came in the 90s I didn't have internet or anything. So
Uh-huh.
that's a big thing. Like now it's less likely because of the internet and information. Um, but even so, like I said, if you're just vulnerable enough and the right person that love bombs you enough, I mean, they will, when they start to study with you, they will jump over hoops and, help you get grocery, whatever. Like if you're sick,
Hmm.
they focus on you and will love bomb you to think like, because part of their whole thing is, we are different than Christianity. And so they really try to make you feel that way.
Hmm.
And like I said, I think coming from an evangelical background, the fact that they are, even though they're a cult and they have their crazy things, they have their crazy, like, we don't do this, we don't do that, they do have a lot of fun. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
saying in the beginning, like they were drinking and I was like, oh, that's pretty liberal.
Yeah.
They're like dancing to regular music, didn't have to be Christian music, they all listened to mainstream music. And I thought, I've always been really into music, and that's one of the things as growing up as an evangelical was the like thorn in my side. So the fact that I could listen to whatever I wanted was a big draw. I was basically a teenager when this happened to me. So, that's something that doesn't really make sense as an adult. It didn't make sense to me back then. That's why I think like teenage, that 19-year-old stage is like a critical time for like evangelicals if they're questioning their own faith. Stephen Hassan, who did the Combating Mind Control book,
Mm-hmm.
he mentioned he was 19 when he got sucked into the Moonies.
Yeah.
And another aspect of that is he made such a good point that resonated with me. It's that you're at that age where you're trying to rebel against your parents, what they want from you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it felt like to me. Like it felt like I know I don't like that, even how I was raised. I know I don't like that and I don't agree with that. So this was like a way of like keeping some semblance of what I thought was like morality, but making my own way.
Yeah.
And like, this is my choice. It was kind of a rebellious thing if I really look back at it, because I remember my dad saying that it was a cult. And I was like, no, it's not. It's
Hmm.
not a cult. At the time, I remember telling my teacher, and she was like, we followed Jesus. Like, we don't even know who the governing body is. So in a cult, you would know who the leader was. And that made sense to me because back then in the 90s, you didn't know who the governing body was.
Sure.
And they did focus highly on following Jesus. When I came in, there was even a book that was exclusively just about Jesus. I forgot. It was like Learn from the Great Teacher or something like that. So that really solidified telling my dad, no, actually, they do believe in Jesus, because that was the other thing he said. They don't believe in Jesus. They actually do believe in Jesus. And, there is no like leader, a human leader. The people who, are trying to keep things organized just follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can't really say that because they do their own like broadcasting, and it's almost like evangelical TV. And they all come out and like do their talk. So everyone knows who the governing body is now, and you wouldn't be able to say that. But back then, I was like, no, it's not a cult. It's so ironic to me when I think about him telling me. It's definitely a cult.
Yeah, and I think I misunderstood when you were mentioning it before about that susceptibility for getting into it. So like you were referring to it like when you're young, how it's kind of there's something kind of cool about it if you're not really feeling evangelicalism and you're younger and like you see what the Jehovah's Witnesses are doing and like they're allowed to drink and dance and all that and they seem kind of they seem sort of like the edgy, cool place to be. You know what I mean? I think
that's what it was like for me.
I think I was picturing. Yeah, I think I was picturing it as like that the susceptibility was like if you're an evangelical and maybe you're really serious about your evangelicalism that maybe there was something about the Jehovah's Witnesses that felt like the next logical step of even becoming further spiritual. But that's not what you were referring to. You were referring to...
No, not really.
Gotcha. You're referring to the other thing where it's like they're trying to attract people at a younger age for a specific purpose.
Yeah, and also if you are struggling with hellfire, that's a big thing. They'll show you like, no, that's hellfire is not you. When you die, you just die.
Yeah.
So I process like, oh, even if I do mess up, even if I can't live exactly the way I'm supposed to, at least I'm not going to be tortured forever.
Right.
That's a pretty big draw when you're indoctrinated to thinking your whole life, I'm probably going to be tortured forever for the choices I've made. Just crazy thinking about. But, there's plenty of evangelical teens who think that if they slip up, that's what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I went to an evangelical high school. I never really considered myself an evangelical with the exception of like 1 year where I was terrified of hell. But like, other than that, I mean, yeah, I mean, the idea of hell, scared me to death when I was younger. Just when I first heard about it and all the things that you can go to hell for, and sort of these teachings of the visions of hell and all of that. There were even a couple of times after I lost my faith, fully, and it wasn't even just like denial of something or not even trying to think about it. But when I said like I no longer believe this, that like I still kind of had these worries that like that I was wrong every once in a while.
Yeah.
Did you get those at all? Like after you kind of decided that you didn't believe it anymore? Like did you after your little time of exploration into what it all meant, like did you, after you did officially say that you don't believe it, like did you still have any of those fears of hell and fears of the other things that they would tell you about that would be punishment?
Definitely. Like I said, when I was pregnant, is when I started thinking like, oh, because we hadn't gotten married, and I just started thinking, what if they're right? And that's why I was so susceptible.
Yeah.
Because it was like timing everything just kind of came together, and that's what happened. That's how people who are not born in are susceptible. Like, it's just like this moment in time where you're just vulnerable enough, and you're just like, you haven't fully debunked, the Bible, and so that's still all there. It was just a perfect storm when they came around, and I bought it.
What about after you left the Jehovah's Witnesses? Did you kind of jump straight into being okay with the fact that you didn't believe it, or did you still have, flashbacks and, little bursts of anxiety afterwards, for a little while too?
No, because I think the key is actually debunking the Bible. That's the step that I missed the first time.
Okay.
Like, if I would have debunked the Bible the first time, I wouldn't have been susceptible to someone coming around with a Bible telling me, oh, but doesn't this version seem a little better of the doctrine? So that's the step that I missed when I was a teenager, is like actually debunking the Bible. Once you do that, you're mentally free. In my mind, once I did that, I felt mentally free. And I would hope the same for others.
Yeah. Did you find that the Bible kind of debunked itself, or did you combine your research into the Bible with, research into other things and just find that they kind of canceled each other out?
I think the Bible debunks itself in all its contradiction. If you really look, like I was saying, if I would have actually studied the Bible, read it, I feel like it debunks itself in so many ways. Since then, I've watched like documentaries about how it was just like a Roman conspiracy and how they actually made the prophecies match. And, since then, like, I can debunk it in even other ways, historically, scientifically, like, but in the beginning, it pretty much contradicted itself. It was so focused on like justice, because what kind of triggered this whole thing was child abuse. And so as you start, if you just focus on that, even it can really debunk itself. Like, actually, the God of the Bible isn't just at all in the things that he's done. So it just started unraveling that way for me.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you wanted to say? Anything else that you wanted to say to, Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, to just anybody who is part of a biblical religion? Just anything else that you wanted to be able to say that I didn't ask about?
I just, hope that everyone has the courage to research, whatever religion, especially if you're having doubts. I know it does take a lot of courage. You can lose your family in some of these cases. So, I just hope people do have the courage to research. And like, for non-Jehovah's Witnesses or anyone who hasn't been a Jehovah's Witness, I want everyone to realize that they knock on your doors even though they're hiding predators. Like, one of the things that has been part of my activism is exposing this child abuse. And I feel like people on the outside don't really, you can hear about religions hiding abuse, but if you're not part of that religion, it's kind of like, oh, that's too bad, But the fact is, like, they will allow a sex offender to knock on your doors. So it's like, I always try to get that message out to the public, that they're not as, it's a dangerous group. And not all Jehovah's, of course, they're not all sex offenders and they're not all predators. But that is the case in some cases. Some cases you will have someone knocking on your door that hasn't been reported because of their policies to not report to authorities. So that's always something I like to tell the public in general.
Yeah.
Just to be on guard. And you know what? You question them about what you saw on the news, question them about their child abuse policies. Like, I'm not against planting seeds or piquing someone's cognitive dissonance, like plenty of times at the door, I've had that happen to me where someone calls me out on shunning and it didn't feel good. But you know what? It planted a seed.
Yeah.
It didn't wake me up instantly, but when I did wake up, I remembered that, like, oh, that person took the time not to attack me, not to, be mean to me, but to challenge me.
Mm-hmm.
We went to your door. I feel like challenge them. I'm not against that. I know there's like, different people feel differently about that, but I feel strongly about making them think.
I feel like you can do it without being rude, I
Exactly. You
think that's
definitely
possible.
can.
Yeah.
There's a lot of videos about like how do you say it? Street epistemology.
Yeah.
That like it's just about questioning, making them question themselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if you ask the right questions, and it will shake. Certain questions will shake you to your core because you won't have an answer
Mm-hmm.
for it. And part of I should say prior to my awakening, my son was doing that. He's always been agnostic atheist and didn't tell me,
Hmm.
but he would just ask me questions that I just could not answer. And so he he didn't wake me up instantly because of that question, but he did make me struggle to make it all come together. And so when I did find the news piece that like clicked everything, it's like a Jenga. It's like a game of Jenga. Like if someone challenges something and you can't really, the structure starts getting weaker, it might take something else down the line to make the whole thing collapse. But those pieces that came out prior were part of your awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember he asked me, um, his grandpa obviously wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. So he was like, when he passed, he was like, how can you say like he won't be resurrected just because he didn't believe in what we believe? He was a good person. Like he did a lot in the community. Like, and I couldn't answer that,
Hmm.
And it, like I said, it didn't wake me up, but it was a piece. And so I feel it the same way when people come to your door, like question some of the things in the Bible, like make them think. And then maybe they'll hear something else and it'll all come together.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to plug your show or any of the activism that you're doing? I'm happy to direct people to some of the things that you do.
Sure. I'm Not Your Vessel on Twitter, and the podcast is Not the Weaker Vessel. There's a link on my Twitter. I haven't really recorded lately, but I think we're gonna try to record a couple more episodes. But thanks, appreciate that.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to do it. We got to support each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Special thanks to Jennifer for the work she does and for dedicating her time for the interview. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for the weekly episode with me and Faye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a written review with 5 stars. The written reviews help to move the show up the charts. For immediate updates and discussions, follow the show on Twitter @OutFoldPodcast. I started a Patreon and GoFundMe, located at Patreon and GoFundMe.com/OutOfTheFold, because I want to be able to dedicate more time to a new approach I'm trying to take with the show. If you're listening right now, I'm not asking you to donate. Rather, just keep doing what you're doing and share the show with someone you trust. Logo and artwork by my wife. Production by my wife and I. All music by me. See you on the internet. This has been Out of the Fold.